Good evening, Tanse Anine. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Daryl Stranger. There has been another fatal house fire on a First Nation. It happened Saturday evening in Sioux Valley, Dakota Nation, about 3 hours west of Winnipeg. An 11-year-old boy was pulled from the home and rushed to hospital, where he died. 7 people were inside the house when the fire started. A 65-year-old woman tried to save the boy, who died. She suffered serious injuries and remains in hospital. To the Yukon now, where a search for suspected unmarked graves will begin this summer at a former residential school site in the territory. Ground-penetrating radar will be used to search the site of the former Chutla Residential School in Carcross. 2 schools operated at the site between 1911 and 1969. At least 20 children are known to have died there. The Yukon Residential School's Missing Children Working Group is leading the work. Other searches will take place in communities like Whitehorse and Dawson City in the years to come.
What it means is that that we will finally get some answers to questions that we've had in our families. It'll help to bring some closure to some people.
The National Indian Residential School Crisis Line is available for survivors and others who might need support. That number is 1-866-925-4419. A small group of 60 Scoop adoptees are wrapping up a 5-day gathering in Ottawa. They came from across North America and even overseas. One of the highlights of the conference was updates to an online mapping project. It was created 3 years ago. Users can not only share stories, but search for resources or connect with other survivors. According to organizer Colleen Heel-Cardinal, the information is growing.
To date, we've had 112 people interact with the map. So they've put their birth story in there. They've shared where they've been taken to as a result of child welfare policies. And then they've shared if they've returned. So 112 so far, but now this is the second part of the map. We've redone the map. Geoforms, an organization, or these 2 awesome gentlemen from the University of BC have been helping with this map. So there's a lot of coding that goes behind it to help self-populate the map. So we've redone it to make it a little bit more easier to look at.
A parliamentary committee continued its study on the issues of human trafficking this week. On Monday, it heard from 5 witnesses from across the country. According to statistics from the Native Women's Association of Canada, 50% of trafficking victims are Indigenous women. Liberal MP Mark Serre asked anti-violence worker Diane Matt for examples of the types of legislation that could protect Indigenous women.
I would invite you to examine the France model because it gives women a time frame, 2 or 3 years. They have access to housing, they have access to support, and it allows them to exit prostitution. It's the same for human trafficking. It's much easier to be brought into it than it is to exit it. And so they need the means to be able to support themselves when they're trying to leave.
The Auditor General is giving the federal government a failing grade when it comes to connecting Northern and remote First Nations to the internet. Karen Hogan released her report on Monday and appeared before a parliamentary committee. It says in 2021, only 43% of on-reserve homes had access to high-speed internet. This number was 99% in urban areas for the same year. Hogan says the gap is creating a digital divide in the country, but Minister of Rural Economic Development, Judy Hutchings, says there has been progress on connecting First Nations.
We've come a long way. The Indigenous communities were 27%. We're now at 50%. I was in Saskatchewan last week and made a major broadband announcement of $37 million. Most of that funding was to connect rural Indigenous communities in northern Saskatchewan.
We have to step aside, but first to BC, where the search continues for missing a young man who's been gone for a month. APTN's Tina House is there covering the story.
I'm Tina House. We're here in downtown Merritt, BC, outside of this family home, which has now been turned into a command center as they continue the search for 24-year-old Miguel Mack. He was last seen on February the 27th. We'll have that story for you tomorrow on APTN National News.
Welcome back to APTN National News. There was some excitement in the Yukon air over the weekend. The 43rd annual Kilrich Yukon Native Hockey Tournament bounced back after a 3-year hiatus caused by the COVID pandemic. Sarah Connors now with more.
After a lengthy hiatus, the 43rd annual Yukon Native Hockey Tournament is back on ice. The Indigenous tournament was put on hold for the last 3 years because of COVID-19. Now it's back and bigger than ever, with 56 teams and over 1,000 players competing from across the Yukon and Canada.
Everybody's just so excited that, we're finally here. And
Michelle Dawson-Beatty is the president of the Yukon First Nations Hockey Association. She says it was a difficult decision to cancel the event, making this year's tournament all the more special.
It's just so nice to be in the arena and hear people cheering for their teams and have the good concession food and just be around people again and celebrate hockey, but also First Nations culture.
The tournament is one of the biggest Indigenous tournaments in Canada, attracting thousands of visitors each year.
I'm excited to see all the teams play. It's really cool when we can all come together and have a tournament like this.
It's the biggest year I heard that they have most teams in and everything like that. So it's going to be nice for everybody. Come back, play with each other. Edmund!
It's also a major cash cow. In previous years, the tournament has generated more than $1 million in local revenue.
People from up north are buying skidoos or four-wheelers or trucks. Like, it's crazy the economic impact that this tournament brings.
This year's tournament starts a day early and has 14 more teams than 2019. Also new this year is a 5-team women's division.
For it to come back like this and then them add the extra day and the women's division and all this stuff is just making it that much bigger.
Deshayla Notstein is a player and organizer for the Cougars women's hockey team. She says it's something she's been hoping for since she was a kid.
This is crazy for us. This is big. There's no other women's tournaments in the Yukon at all, right? So for us to have even just that is huge.
Notstein says for many in the hockey community, the tournament is the social event of the year.
For our people, it's such a big deal because it's kind of like the Stanley Cup for like Native people, right?
This year's tournament runs until the 26th. Dawson Beatty says while hockey might be the main focus, community is what really makes the tournament a mainstay.
It's pretty powerful, so I think one is like the competitiveness and kind of the bragging rights to it, and then just coming together and celebrating like First Nations culture, right? I think that's a huge part of it.
Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
The 40th Labrador Winter Games wrapped up for another year recently with the last competition, the popular dog sled race. APTN's Angel Moore is at the Games and brings us some of the highlights.
That's Taylor Russell of Charlottetown, Labrador, claiming victory in the dog sled race.
I like everything about it. Freedom, being out on the trail.
The 25-kilometer race took place at Mud Lake, about 20 kilometers east of Happy Valley Goose Bay. It's called the Henry John Williams Memorial Dog Sled Race, named after a Cartwright fisherman and trapper who kept dog teams his entire life. Williams' great-granddaughter, Kayla, was at the race with her children.
It's awesome. I think it's really important to teach them about the history of the dog racing in our family and to try to keep the tradition alive and in his memory especially.
Another popular event is the high kick. It's a traditional Inuit game. Athletes kick a stuffed seal. Each round, the seal is raised. The highest kick is the winner. This is the first time Zoe Panansi, a 13-year-old from the Natwashish First Nation, participated in the games.
The excitement and people cheering me on.
And this is the 4th year for Ashley Best of Mud Lake.
And you know what? You get the experience of doing all these games. You're in front of so many people. You just push to limits that you didn't really know you had.
However, one of the most traditional events of the Games was cancelled, the Labrathon. Disappointed athletes held the event anyway. About 40 people showed up in support. Guido Rich, known as Ghetto, of Rigolet, won gold last year, says the event did not need to be cancelled.
Because of conditions, and we proved that today that we can still have it. It's perfect conditions for it.
The Labrathon tests the ability to live off the land, like trappers did for generations. The event includes making a fire to melt ice for tea, poking a hole through the ice, and sawing wood. Nikki Dyson of Cartwright says,
"We've trained all winter for this. Like, me and Ghetto took gold last year, last game, sorry, and people traveled from all around the coast. And we just come to compete, and it was just a disappointment to get here and find out the day before the race that it's been canceled."
The director of sport, Barry Keogh, told APTN News in a statement, "We had a big thaw rain about 3 weeks ago. It took all of the snow on the bay. All was left was a sheet of very slippery ice, impossible to walk on, so certainly could not snowshoe on. Also need snow for the other components of the competition. We could not find a suitable replacement location." The closing ceremonies honored about 500 athletes that came from every Labrador community, and the volunteers and the spectators. The event included a fashion show, showcasing traditional dress. Provincial Minister responsible for Indigenous Affairs and Reconciliation, Lisa Dempster, committed to fund sports.
We are making a commitment with money to continue regional games in the north and south in the off years. I am coming with $50,000 tonight, and I've just been speaking with our MP, and she told me she's going to match it.
The next Winter Games, also known as the Friendship Games, will be held in 2026. Angel Moore, APTN National News, Happy Valley, Goose Bay, Labrador.
Well, it wasn't the outcome they were hoping for, but Team Canada still brought home a medal from the Women's World Curling Championship held this past week in Sweden. Team Einarson, skipped by Métis curler Carrie Einarson, won the bronze medal at the Worlds on Sunday. The four-time Canadian women's curling champions also brought home bronze from last year's tournament. Defending champion Switzerland defeated Norway in the gold medal game. It was the fourth straight World Women's title for Team Switzerland. All right, we have to step aside quickly here. When we come back, photo of the day and weather. Welcome back. A Court of King's Bench justice has released Nerissa and Odelia Quewezance of the Mistawasis First Nation in Saskatchewan on a $5,000 surety. Justice Donald Lay made his decision today in Yorkton. APTN's Brent McGilvery has more.
The long road to justice for Odelia and Nerissa Quewezance cleared another hurdle in a Yorkton courtroom. King's Bench Justice Donald Lay released the sisters on bail pending the results of their ministerial review.
I feel I'm relieved. We're home free, and I just want to thank the judge. And that's all I have to say right now. Thank you, and my family being here and all our support. I'm shocked, but thank you.
The two sisters from the nearby Mistawasis Saulteaux First Nation were convicted of murder in the killing of farmer Anthony Dolph in 1994. A cousin of theirs confessed to the crime and served a prison sentence. The Quewezance sisters have always maintained their innocence. James Lockyer of Innocence Canada, a lobby group for the wrongfully convicted, is representing the sisters.
This is a big step en route to the minister's eventual decision, because the purpose of this is to get their convictions quashed so that their names are cleared.
Justice Lay said he was satisfied that there is a public interest in granting bail to Nerissa and Odelia, and that they will surrender to authorities when the Justice Minister decides on a new trial or appeal. The decision is effective immediately.
It's obviously very emotional. Odelia can go back to living full-time, all the time, with her two twin daughters and her husband. And Nerissa is going to be out of an institution and out of an institutional environment into a lovely home in Saskatoon with two lovely people.
It's now up to the federal justice minister to decide if, when, and where a new trial for the sisters will go ahead. Brent McGillivray, APTN National News, Yorkton, Saskatchewan.
Odelia and Nerissa are under strict conditions. They cannot leave Saskatchewan, they must get counseling and employment, and they cannot contact Anthony Dolph's family. A group of warrior women was honored last week during the 50th anniversary of the Wounded Knee occupation by members of the American Indian movement. Here's that story from Stuart Huntington and Shirley Sneve at ICT.
The Warrior Women Project celebrated the women who put their lives on the line in 1973 at Wounded Knee. The project gathers oral histories from the women of the Red Power movement. Some of the veterans of the occupation were in Porcupine to share their stories. Lavita Yigo talked about the spiritual awakening she underwent when she joined AIM.
I was not taught my Kiowa traditional ways. I didn't know anything about my Kiowa ways, but it taught me when I went to Wounded Knee of the spirituality of what it was all about. Well, AIM was all about. And I wanted that. I was hungry for something for that, and I found it. Through the American Indian movement, I found my spirituality.
About 200 people came to Porcupine, like Diane Bird, who left her teaching job in California to join the occupation. She returned to Pine Ridge for the 50th anniversary commemoration.
I was part of security working with these guys, and they set up a radio, and there was little radios in every bunker, and we kept in touch with each other, and they would ask, and it was controlled. There was a head of security, and the security would know where the people in the bunkers were and what level of fire to respond to, whether it was 100%, 50%, or hold your fire, period. Because we didn't have that many guns, and we didn't have that many bullets for those guns. We were surrounded by federal marshals, by FBI, with tanks, with all the latest weapons, like even from the Army, and we didn't know it, but we learned about that later. And all we had were like little rabbit plunkers, that kind of thing.
Madonna Thunderhawk has participated in every major Red Power operation from Alcatraz to Standing Rock. She says it's no surprise to find women at the forefront.
And when the Red Power movement came, in those days, your community was the ones that made those decisions and decided how things were going to run. So it was automatically a matriarchal system. Still is today. But we don't have to constantly make a big issue of it and run around and, because it's culture, it's tradition. It's the way it is.
Tradition, yes, but the women of Wounded Knee still inspire.
Their actions in coming together and reclaiming their rights as Lakota warriors, Lakota matriarchs, they did that for us. They made an everlasting imprint on generations and generations, bringing back the strength and bringing back the ability for us as, Lakota people to be able to be proud of who we are.
definitely found the women speaking today to be so inspiring. About a year ago, there was a film screening at the Fargo Theater, and so I was able to sit down with Madonna and her team and her daughter, and so it was a very rich moment to be in the presence of giants that have paved the way for us. But yes, definitely find inspiration from them, and hope to continue pushing the work towards justice forward for all of us.
Pushing forward with a powerful message.
I'm not only a survivor of Wounded Knee, I'm a survivor of rape and abuse, domestic violence. I'm a survivor of those three. So I call myself, I used to be in the victim stage, or think I was a victim. I'm no longer a victim.
That's a good message.
Yeah. And if you're in that kind of trouble, get help. There's help out there. Get brave enough. Get courage in your heart to take a stand for yourself. That's what it's all about. And that's what AIM taught me. That's what being in Wounded Knee taught me, was to be more bold, speak up. Creator didn't make you a mouth and not say nothing. Speak up.
That courageous act of defiance was the beginning of a new era. I was in high school in 1973. My parents taught at the Flandreau Indian Boarding School in South Dakota. Suddenly, after the occupation of Wounded Knee, we became proud of our Native American heritage. We learned to bead, a simple but powerful way to embrace culture. In Lincoln, Nebraska, Shirley Snavy, ICT News.
Well, that brings us to our photo of the day. Our very own Sarah Connors was recently in Hawaii and was able to catch a glimpse of a double rainbow. I wonder if Sarah asked, what does it mean? If you have a photo you would like to share, you can send that photo to share@aptn.ca. Right now, let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Beginning on the East Coast, 1 degree in St. John's and 2 in Charlottetown. Kuujjuaq is looking at -13 in snow and 3 degrees in Happy Valley Goose Bay. 5 degrees in Quebec City and 4 in Montreal. 7 degrees and some sun and cloud in Toronto and 3 in North Bay. -1 in snow in Wawa and -7 in snow in Sioux Lookout. -15 in snowing in Churchill and snow and -8 in Norway House. -11 in snow in Barons River, and Winnipeg is looking at -10. Clear and -8 for Regina and -7 for Saskatoon. -5 in Buffalo Narrows and -10 in Stony Rapids. As we make our way west, a -5 in Fort Chipewyan and +1 in Peace River. 4 degrees in Edmonton and -1 in Calgary. 13 and clear in Vancouver and 13 and clear in Bella Coola. Prince Rupert is 11 degrees and clear, and Fort Nelson is 10. -1 in snow in Beaver Creek and -5 in Old Crow. 1 degree in snowing in Norman Wells and 1 in Fort Simpson. -5 and snow in Fort McPherson and 0 in Colville Lake. Cambridge Bay is looking at -21 and -15 for Chesterfield. -23 in Arctic Bay and a -16 in Igloolik. Certainly great to see some of those temperatures rising. All right, that is all we have for you tonight on APTN National News. For all of us here, I'm Daryl Stranger. Thank you so much for joining us. Miigwech Kinanaskamitin. Have a great night.